Islam is the second major religion in the world and also the fastest growing one. I'm sure you do know that Quran is the primary text for Islam and which is read along with multiple hadiths, and these hadiths offer an insight to the life of Prophet Muhammad, the founder of Islam, his teachings and all the sayings and experiences from his life. It is important to note that religious texts, in most cases, they must be read in the context, in the historical context, in the cultural context. So, in this case, whether you're a Muslim or non Muslim, if you're going to explore Islam and read about it, it's very important to understand the context before you pick up Quran or any hadith. And here it's quite relevant to understand the context of 7th century Arabia, the cultural background, the story of Makkah and Medina, the kind of tribes that existed there, the pagan culture that predates Islam, the tribal warfares, and huge civilizational conflicts, and the middle of that, life of Prophet Muhammad. It's necessary to understand the life of Muhammad, his ideas, if you want to understand Islam. He was left an orphan as a small boy. Then he found his way to life through merchant business, and quite later in his life, after he turned 40, he became a religious and political leader of the tribe that now constitutes more than 1.6 billion people around the earth. How did that happen? And that takes us to the story of Prophet Muhammad. There are two books I'm going to talk about today and I'm going to recommend to you. The first book, The Life of Muhammad, was written in the 8th century by a Muslim scholar called Ibn Ishaq. It was written after some time since the death of Prophet Muhammad, and through the oral traditions and in the light of hadiths and all the texts, this is one of the first texts or the biographies about Prophet Muhammad. As you would expect, the writing is quite different. A lot of poetry is there. The book proceeds quite slowly and then gives a lot of details here and there. That's why I reckon you would need a lot of patience while going through this book. It's quite noticeable that the book was written by an early Islamic scholar, and you would find that it is written in the light of Quran and the Hadith. And interestingly, there are some occasions where the author says, I don't know how that happened, or maybe that happened. He speculates, he guesses, and sometimes he says, God only knows what was going on. So there is some room for doubt, as author himself acknowledges, which is quite interesting. And that to me seems like quite an honest account. The other book that I find quite interesting is a 21st century book by Leslie Hazelton. The book is called The First Muslim. The interesting thing here is the book was written by a non-Muslim who is an agnostic, and she writes it from the point of view of an outsider. So if you are a non-Muslim, If you want to see it more objectively, then this one would be an easier read. Although she derives, much like many other modern scholars, a lot of ideas from Ibn Shak's writings, but as a psychologist and as a scholar, she tries to make things easier for the reader. And some people may not like that sometimes, especially the points where she tries to understand the psychology of the Prophet Muhammad and tries to guess what was going on in his mind, and she does it with various other characters. Some people do not like this idea. I personally don't mind this because, based on the evidence that we have, it's important to see or at least guess what could be the psychology then. It's fine if an author guesses what was going on in another person's mind back then. I don't mind that. And I'm sure many of you won't. Another point of concern while reading history is that it could be disturbing. It could be disturbing for people who believe some things, and it could be disturbing also for the another set of people who go to read a text expecting something and it doesn't come out that way. But history is history and you can't change it, and you have to accept it the way it happened. That's the only way you can deal with it. So, in this case, a lot of examples come from Prophet Muhammad's life, which might not feel convenient to some people. For example, the killing of Jews, killings of some poets who criticized him in his poetry, and many other flaws of an individual that we all have, but some people don't want to acknowledge that. And this is especially true for Muslims who see their Prophet as the perfect human being. And when they encounter certain issues which affect their worldview, then they try to give certain explanations, such as this is not true, maybe this scholar is biased, or maybe there was another reason. But we can't do that with history. Similarly, some other people might say about the same authors that they are biased towards Muslims and they are not presenting an honest review of how bad things were back then. In my view, uh, these authors present quite an honest representation of what went there, what went on there, and how things were like back then. And to understand more, I would say that you have to read these books. They're quite interesting. As I said, there is difference in the two books that I discussed, and they are meant for different kinds of readers. But once you read these books, the biography of Prophet Muhammad, right from his childhood to his death, you would understand the person much better. You would understand whatever happened, why that happened, and in the light of that, you can understand a whole religion in a much better way. I hope you would do that. Thank you very much.